Welcome to SCBWI Carolina's Book Fairies First Look. I'm your host, Mickey Bear. Joining me today is highly celebrated picture book author Sue Soltis. The Moon Moved In, illustrated by Sonia Sanchez, is Sue's third picture book and was released July 1st, 2025 by Chronicle Books. The book received advanced praise from Aaron Becker, author-illustrator of Caldecott Honor-winning picture book Journey and 2024's The Last Zookeeper. It was selected for the Children's Book Council's June Hot Off the Press list and has received 3-starred reviews so far. School Library Journal said it's a must purchase. Kirkus Reviews called the story beautifully paced, and Book Page said The Moon Moved In is a charming, delightfully eccentric story with artwork that creates a tangible, welcoming world you never want to leave. The book was also a July editor's pick on Amazon. Sue's second picture book, The Stars Just Up the Street, published by Candlewick Press and illustrated by Christine Davenier, came out in March 2020. It was featured in the Wall Street Journal, listed on darksky.org's recommended books for 2021, and named on Smithsonian Air and Space Magazine's roundup of the best aviation and space-themed books for young readers in 2020. The Stars Just Up the Street was included in North Carolina statewide Star Party kits mailed to each Star Party host site across the state as part of the 2023 North Carolina Science Festival. In 2021, her first picture book, Nothing Like a Puffin, celebrated 10 years in print by coming out in paperback. The book, illustrated by Bob Kohler, published by Candlewick Press, is a 2012 Charlotte Zolito Award highly commended title, was selected for the Schoolie's Best Picture Books of 2011 in Scholastic's Top Teaching blog, was featured in Time Out New York, and received a star review in Kirkus Reviews. Sue lives in Chapel Hill, North Carolina with her family and 2 cats. Welcome, Sue.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that lovely introduction, Mickey.
Of course. But before we dive into questions, here's a little bit more about your latest release, The Moon Moved In. When the moon moves into the long, empty house next door, all the rooms fill up with light, and Stella finally has a friend. But without the moon in orbit, the world is going topsy-turvy. The tides stop, and the Earth has a new wobble. Stella worries, but the moon just wants to stay and garden. Can Stella convince the moon that life on Earth needs the moon back in orbit? And what will become of her wish for a friend next door? The Moon Moved In offers such a creative and unique take on natural interactions between the Earth and Moon. How did the story come about?
In my writing, I focus a lot of times on language and how things sound. So, one of the things I do when I'm like, what am I going to do next? I brainstorm titles, and it must have been on a list of these titles, and it drew me in because it both has this sonic, captivating sound to it, I think. And also it's one of those like what if right from the get-go, it's built into the title. What if, well, what if, everybody might have a different answer for what if the moon moved in next door to you, if you had an empty house next door to you or an empty apartment next door to your apartment. What if the moon moved in? So, this story had a really long path. I started writing it actually before I started writing The Stars Just Up the Street. So that tells you a little bit about the chronology without going into really how long. And so I think with the revision process with this book, it was more like, sometimes you're doing a revision and it turns totally a different direction. I don't think this ever happened here, but it was chiseling away at the real points of the turning points in the story, I think, and really getting to Stella's character more so than, making her sort of the prominent character and sort of balancing that out with the moon as well. So I think, in writing this story, I think I learned a lot about plot. It was, since it took so long, it was part of my journey on that path because my first book was a concept book and I come at writing through poetry, which a lot of times doesn't involve plot at all. And so with a focus on language it was really important to me to learn plot and learn it well and get it really across so that we're getting to something that you want to turn the page. Not that I haven't been able to do that, but I think this has more of a, what if that builds and builds.
So, how does your book fit in with the era that we live in right now?
It has connections to the environment. How are we connected to our environment? And that's a big issue of our time right now. The interconnectedness of human interaction and what we are doing to the planet, and also just on a small scale, what can we do in our own yards. It also connects, I think, through the facts themselves. Just we want to know what are the facts, and we want to separate the facts from the non facts and facts from the things that look like facts but aren't actually facts. And also, too, I think it has a connection with what I think is a big issue of our times, which is just agency. How do I get agency in my daily life? How do I do it with the big things I want to do? That kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, so messaging goes hand in hand with word selection. On your website, you talk about the importance of language and logic to your writing and how critical thinking is linked to reading stories. So how does the moon moved in reflect those types of ideas?
I think it connects with those ideas on a bunch of levels. So, like I already mentioned, facts and just the logic of facts, and how again, to take that a little further, how you use logic to tell facts, which is like a theme of my first book, Nothing Like a Puffin. It's really logic and the kind of like three-step syllogism that you learn in school about logic is a big part of how that book takes logic. And in this book, the character is looking at facts and using them and figuring out, should she use these facts? Should she not use these facts? And another way it connects is just like the story, the importance of there's the story itself, which I think is a telling and retelling of stories is just so important to how we learn logic just from the very beginning of, when kids are learning how to talk, there's story involved. And in this book, The Moon Moved In, there's, I think, story within a story. There's the story that Stella wants to tell. There's the story the moon has as to why the moon is there. And then there's the other ways that outside of them too, that there's a story about what happens to the earth. And then I like this image a lot because it's like, oh, there's a book within the book and a story within a story. I think all those things are kind of tied together in, how we communicate and how we learn, and in a fun way too. It's a story, so it's hopefully fun to get into and tell.
Well, and as writers, we bring aspects of our own lives into our writing. So what connections do you have with some of the practical things in the book, like gardening and sewing?
Yeah, sewing is one that I also really love, the sewing image in this story that Sonia Sanchez did with the sewing machine. But one of the things about sewing in the story is like sewing or not sewing. Can you sew or can you not sew? So I can't actually sew, but I still feel like I have this history of sewing in my life. Just like my aunt was a pretty accomplished seamstress, so she would make my sister's clothing and she made our drapes, and she was also really good at like crocheting, and I still have some beautiful works of hers. Never learned how to do it myself, but it's always something that I like in my adult life. I've sometimes come up with, oh, I want to make this dress, and here I draw on the dress. Never got beyond the drawing of the dress, but it's something that's kind of there in the background. And then gardening, along the way of this book coming out and being a story, I started to get more into what native plants I could bring into the yard, and seeing what things were brought into the yard with when I did that was really interesting.
Many writers like you and I work in other fields. How do you balance having a day job with your writing career?
It is hard, I think. There's fluctuations in it. I think if people, probably I'm not alone in that. If you have a more or less full-time job and you're trying to write, and you might also be a parent, you have a lot of juggling to do. Traditionally, how I've done it is to take myself out of the space of where I work and where I do my day job work and where I live and do my family things. Just try to get out of that space and make my own space. That became really difficult during COVID, in fact, which seems like, on one hand, a long time ago, but not really in a way for all the things that we might still be dealing with about it. But I hope to get back to that balance. I do feel like it's so hard that it's easy enough to like fall off doing it. And I feel like I have to reassess how I do that. And now that the libraries are open, and they have been for a long time, but I had other things, and now, I just yeah, when COVID happened, I couldn't get to the library, and it was became that much more difficult.
So obviously we're driven then by passion, right? Because we make it work. What is your favorite part about the writing process?
Well, right now, even though this book has been a long time coming out, it just seems like a lot of my tasks lately have been revision or doing other aspects of getting this book out. So right now, I think just because I haven't been doing it, it's like I tend to like write longhand on paper, and that's what I want to do. That could be right now my favorite part. And I love revision because it's like a puzzle, but right now I just feel like I really want to get back to that, and I really like that.
So what's next for you? Are you working on any new projects?
I'm going to be. I have how you are supposed to when you start out. It's like there's like another new beginning maybe, because I have a stack as you're supposed to when you first look around to get published. And I have to just assess what I want to do with that. And also, I'd like to soon or eventually, write a longer piece. I have a graphic novel in mind and a middle grade idea that I hope to get to. But I also just want to continue to writing picture books that I'm hoping involve story and logic and are fun and also make readers think.
We want to stay in touch with you and know what's coming out and when. What is the best way for educators, librarians, families to stay up to date with your publications and events?
My website is suesoltis.com, so easy, just my name. And you can follow me on Facebook, sue.soltis.5. I'm on Instagram, suesoltis.books. Sue Soltis, all one word, .books. And also just recently, if you want to read more about like my writing of The Moon Moved In, the July 15th of Picture Book Builders, all one word.com I did a guest post there.
Oh, great. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Sue, and congratulations again on your latest release, The Moon Moved In.
Thank you so much for having me on here. It was a pleasure.